All right, welcome and thank you all for joining us this evening for tonight's presentation for Gymnastics, Officiate Michigan Day. The presentation is entitled Meet Preparation and Professionalism. It's by Angela Madden, a longtime MHSAA gymnastics official. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Angie.
Thanks, Brent. I appreciate it. Hey, everybody. Brenda, Doris, Brittany. It's the four of us tonight. So looking forward to a really good conversation as we go along. I hope all the technology is working properly and you can see the presentation on your screens. If you have an issue, raise your hand and I will do my best. Brent's going to be in and out throughout the evening as well. So, okay. So most of you already know my credentials. So here you go. We'll run right through them for everybody else that's on the recording. 2021 was my 22nd officiating year. I'm also a registered assigner, member of the MHSGCJA. You all know this, meet ref at regionals, final selections. My day job, I'm a trade association executive here in downtown Lansing. And fun fact, I'm actually in my office for the first time in about 20 months right now. So exciting. I had a big pile of mail to go through, but it was worth it. All right. And last but certainly not least, I always like to throw in this fun fact. Maybe now I'm also a hot air balloon pilot. I should have put a picture of my balloon in here for everybody, but find me on Facebook. You can see it. That's an old headshot. Got about a few inches chopped off my hair since then. Okay. So what I have for us today is kind of an overview of what it means for me, at least, to be an official. I'd like to open this conversation up for the four of us to kind of talk through it if I've missed anything, if you have anything else that you'd like to add, and then really try to get an idea of what it means to each of you also. So let's start. Let's open it. Brittany, Doris, Brenda, any one of you want to immediately provide your thoughts on what does it mean to be a gymnastics judge? Very timely since we have the Olympics going on right now as well. So,
well, I like to be involved in gymnastics in many ways, and so being a judge is, I think, a great way to contribute to the gymnastics community. And I believe in, doing my best and trying to learn more about the sport and hopefully educate and help others in the sport.
Great, Brittany, thanks. Doris, Brenda?
It's a great way, to stay involved with the sport that we love. It's a great way to mentor new officials. I take a lot of pride in being a gymnastics official. It's not an easy sport. What's the old saying? If it was easy, it'd be called football, right? But so I think just kind of adding to what Brittany said. That's why I do it.
Brenda, how about you?
Well, I would have to say that it just kind of carried on a passion from when I was young, and I didn't want to let it go. And this was another outlet. So about 40 years ago, I jumped on board, and I haven't looked back since. I mean, it's a nice way to encourage young women to stay actively involved in sports. Interestingly enough, I was at Staples today, and the gentleman that waited on me was talking about wrestling, and I said, hey, they're looking for wrestling officials. You need to register if this is your passion, and while you're going to college, you can work work it in your schedule. So I think that Michigan provides an opportunity to keep your sports going once you're outside of your competitive days, and I truly love it.
Those are all really great examples. I wanted to take the opportunity to share a funny story. Some of you have heard me, you guys have probably all heard me say this before, but when I officiate a gymnastics meet, it started with my husband, Ryan, would always ask me how many little kids' hearts I was going to break that day, because he expected me to provide a insubstantial score. And it's turned into a little bit of a joke for him now, but I got to tell you, I took personal offense to it because I don't feel like I know I'm not officiating just to go out there and give the lowest score I can possibly give, just to be judgmental on somebody, to use that word in a different way. I'm out there to provide an opinion. And in fact, the dictionary.com definition of judging is to form an opinion or conclusion or to evaluate a performance. And I feel like judging for me is more of an evaluation of an individual athlete's performance. Now, in our instance, on 4 different disciplines, right? But I feel like that's a much better way to think about, what judging gymnastics is. I'm not out to break, girls' dreams. I'm not out to tell them that they're not going to get a D1 scholarship. I'm out there to evaluate what they've done that day and only that day, and to provide them a score that's reflective of their performance. So I think, Ryan and I have gone around and round on that a couple of times, and he no longer asks me how many little girls' hearts I break every time I go to a meet. Okay, so here's a funny, the National Federation of High Schools defines judging as, quote, evaluating a performance through mathematical computation. And I tossed up this cartoon because I thought it was absolutely hilarious. So Tony the Tiger is judging a cooking competition, and Tony says it's grrr, and you see the cooks, the chefs, getting all excited about what Tony's going to say, and then he says it's gross. And sometimes I feel that maybe, some of our athletes might feel this, but I think at least in gymnastics, I think the athletes know when they haven't hit the routine that they should have, or maybe that they wanted to hit, and they realize, that their score is going to be reflective of that, particularly with those of us on the call right now. So I just thought that was a little bit of a funny cartoon. I thought I'd toss that in there. And so evaluating a performance through mathematical computation. Sometimes I struggle with the mathematical computation part, but I can tell you I'm always happy to evaluate a performance. Okay, so here is a couple of judges evaluating a performance. I thought it would be fun to break this up. She has beautiful lines, doesn't she? Okay, moving on, sorry. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about professionalism and what professionalism means, okay? For me, there's a couple of things, and I wrote some notes here, and I have not put these all in slides, but I kind of jotted some things down for me, what it means to be a professional official, professional gymnastics official. First and foremost, I want to establish an environment for the athletes and the coaches to succeed in their job. And I think it's really important that we as officials realize that it's important for the coaches to succeed in their positions as well in developing these athletes. I think another item is that we have to be fair. That's also a demonstration of our professionalism. All of our attention needs to be on the athletes, and we must view ourselves as professionals not only when we are officiating, but when we're not. Brenda, kind of like in your instance, when you're interacting with a gentleman at Staples and you're talking about asking him to become an official, approaching him one official to another, colleague to colleague. And I think that's really important for us as our profession in how we approach each other. So here are some things about, does anybody have any thoughts on that before I move on to actually the definitions of professionalism? So I'm kind of skipping through a little bit. Okay. So first and foremost, professionalism is a soft skill, right? it's not a skill that is, it's an interpersonal skill. Maybe that's a better way to describe it. You know it when you see it, but you don't necessarily always have it immediately. It's something that has to be or needs to be developed in order to succeed in your workplace. And in our workplace, we're talking about the gym, right? During a gymnastics meet. Professionalism enables you to fit in with the rest of the officials, and it is reflective of your personality, your attitude, your flexibility, your motivations, and even maybe your manners. So that's what being a, because it's a soft skill, that's what makes it difficult. Okay. I kind of already said this. Sorry, I jumped ahead. It's easy to spot. Most people know it when they see it. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's easy to obtain. You guys just jump in at any point in time, okay? None of you will offend me. Okay. It's not easy to develop. A lot of people have to work on it. Maybe new judges have to work on it. It can be difficult to go from the floor side of the table to the officiating side of the table, whether or not you are an athlete or a coach, switching from one side or the other. It might not necessarily be very easy to develop for yourself. It requires a very specialized knowledge in our sport. And I don't know of any examples really around our state now where there is individuals out there that don't have the specialized knowledge in our sport. But I do think that's what makes recruiting officials extremely difficult for the sport of gymnastics. We can only recruit seemingly from a very small pool of people, graduating seniors mostly. Does anybody disagree with that? While I take a drink.
Nope, I totally agree. It's you can't have, it's like we could possibly cross over and officiate volleyball with a couple trainings. We could probably do it and do okay. But a volleyball official couldn't say, hey, I'll send in my extra money and be a gymnastics official and go do a couple trainings and boom, judge a meet. So it is very specialized.
Yeah, there are some sports out there that I don't think I would try, because I don't believe that I would be able to represent that sport professionally as an official. Lacrosse being the first one that comes to my mind. Wrestling being another one. I know even with a couple of trainings, I don't know that I could be a professional official in either of those sports. However, I could probably whip together, enough knowledge with a whistle to make myself dangerous. Maybe not dangerous isn't a good word, but I could probably do a good job. Basketball, volleyball, football, more mainstream sports that we see very regularly. Okay, so I have put together, and don't worry, after this slide, I have an activity for us. So you guys aren't getting off super easy. All right, so these are the 8 characteristics of professionalism, I think. So let me know if I missed some, okay? All right, appearance. I think it is extremely important that we are dressed for success. In our instance, in our uniforms. I don't think coming in a pair of dark jeans or leggings, or dark jeans or leggings really, adds that, has the appearance that we need to be professional. I think you can do really good things with a pair of black slacks. We're not going to wear tennis shoes. We're not going to wear neon. Our appearance is extremely important as an official to portray that air of professionalism when we are walking into a gym for a meet to do our job.
Well, and I also believe that you get to the higher levels or the invitationals or the state finals, you owe it to the sport to represent that sport to the best of your ability. And that includes putting on a jacket. I mean, you're getting paid well. It's a black jacket, it'll last forever. Spend the money and carry yourself at the highest level you expect to judge.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Think real quick, Angie, is I always go back to when I took Latin in school, that clothes make the man, or in this case, possibly the woman too. But you act how you're dressed. And when I go to a meeting or I go to state finals and I'm in a suit, I feel more professional.
100%, Doris. I absolutely agree with you. And it's funny, so I always love using my kids, right, as my sounding boards. And I will, especially now post-pandemic, if I'm not walking out of my room wearing sweatpants, the very first thing they ask is, do you have meetings today? But I don't think that's just a pandemic related issue. I think absolutely, if I have my board of directors coming in, if I have, another meeting, another client meeting, maybe I'm looking for sponsorships for something, I want to be able to impress upon the person I'm meeting with that I'm there and that I mean business. And dressing that way is one of the easiest ways to portray that to someone.
Well, and Angie, adding to that.
Yep.
I mean, it's clearly written in the rules what we are supposed to wear. So if you expect to enforce rules on the athlete, you need to participate on your part as well.
I wholeheartedly agree. But since this is being recorded and Brent will come back and listen to it, I will put my plug in right now for a solid black dress with a black jacket.
Agreed. I like dresses.
Because I have suit separates that look just as professional and are just as, they're my power suits that are black on black. Just so there you go, Brent. There's my pitch. But appearance is extremely, extremely important. And if we want to be taken seriously, then we need to dress to be taken seriously. The second item that's been up on the screen is reliability. I think
Brent gave you a thumbs up on his name. I don't know if you can see it, but he gave you a thumbs up, so he heard your little.
Excellent. Thanks, Brent. The next item on my list is reliability. As a professional, we are being counted on to get our jobs done, right? If we're not reliable, if we're not prompt, if we're not following through on anything that we've talked about, and we're not there in a timely manner, then we're not reliable. We're not demonstrating that we are professional. We can never make assumptions, and we have, well, I guess judging is kind of making a little bit of one, but we need to make sure that we are all on the same page, and the 30-minute rule is a big deal. I know we kind of have a couple of people that typically run late. God bless them. I love them to death, but we need to do our best. Set your alarm 30 minutes earlier. Do something to help yourself stay on time, because I really feel that it reflects extremely poorly on all of us if we have a general note of being unreliable.
Can I add just a piece of that?
Yeah.
And when we went to Arbiter, we lost the paper contract that reminded you that you have a contractual agreement you signed that says you will attend at 30 minutes prior to. I mean, we all know that we work in the winter season and
Things happen.
road traveling.
Yep.
Yeah, it's questionable at times.
Yep.
But I think we lost that with some of our new officials because they didn't start out with the fact that you actually put your name on a contract and you actually had responsibilities laid out in front of you. It's like, for being an old one, I kind of miss that a little bit. I mean, it holds both sides accountable. And that's what we're asking. That's what we're saying. You are an official. You be responsible, be reliable, be accountable to what you agreed to do.
That's a good point, and something myself as an assigner can make sure that we are reminding our officials of consistently, through the season, not just at the beginning of the season when the schedule comes out, when contracts start going out, but something that we can use as a consistent reminder for. I think it also helps that that most schools are becoming more and more consistent on their start time as well. But there are a couple of hiccups, every season where start time gets changed for one reason, gym availability usually. But I think that is absolutely something.
But
You're right.
Also adding, when Kathy does our fall training and she does our seasonal reminders, that's a good place to throw it in there. Just a reminder, officials, you have a report time of 30 minutes prior to start time. That way the newbies know, the seniors like myself are reminded again, this is going to be looked at. It's important.
Yeah, it is. It is in the judging manual. It's also in the clarifications, but you're right. I think sometimes we forget that those documents are there and that they're available, and we forget to access them or look to see if there's any updates. So you're right. I think putting it in either the rules meeting or the fall update or both would be a good reminder for all of us. Punctuality, we kind of just hit with reliability, so I'm going to skip right over that one. Competence. I really feel that, we should be striving to be an expert in the field of officiating gymnastics. And I feel that that level of competence is what sets us apart from other officials, maybe other officials within the same sport, or even other officials in different sports. And that to me, and I'd be curious to what each of you believe it means to be competent or ready to officiate means. I personally believe it's participating in continuing education like this, or joining your association, or, maybe it's working with or following a USAG something or other, or an AAU, in continuing to increase our knowledge about our sport and about how best to evaluate each apparatus for our athletes. So I'm going to stop and let you guys, kind of fill in right there.
So agreed, those are all important things, as well as reviewing and reading the book, each year or, throughout the year, and then utilizing the points that are made, for example, with a free hip circle, at this angle, this is a free hip circle, this is the deduction needs to be taken at this degree, this degree, this degree. And I don't know, I'm a believer by this is what the book says. So consistently, that's what should be followed.
Brenda, Doris, you got anything you want to add to that one?
Well, I'll jump in. For me, it is being prepared to sit down in that chair and to do your job and to do it to the best of your ability in that moment. It's also being able to communicate your position to coaches when there's disputes. It's also being able to be extremely fair and disconnected from the personalities and the teams, but to judge a body, I like to say I don't recognize the head. I just judge the athlete based on the body and the skill. Lots of times I couldn't tell you which athlete did what, but I know what skills scored what. So I really feel like to be competent would be to be able to fulfill your job in that chair, but be professional enough to handle unusual situations that do arise throughout some meets.
That's a good point. It's not just officiating the meet. It's sometimes the other kind of aspects of it, the questions that come of it, the being able to, I don't want to use the word defend your position, but being able to back it up in case there is a question about the judgment that you made. Poise and attitude, I think, is also a huge characteristic. If you come into the meet, if you come into the gym with a crappy attitude, I think it's going to be reflective. And I think you have a very good chance of taking it out on the athletes. And like we said earlier, it's always about the athlete. It's not about the bad day that you had earlier. It's not about the stressful drive you had in the middle of a blizzard to get there. It's not about maybe a miscommunication. Maybe the address was put in wrong in arbiter, or the AD, I don't know, maybe something didn't get communicated properly. But you have to have the right attitude in order to be professional, in order, so that your evaluation and your scores are truly reflective of the performance, the routine that you saw. If not, then it's unfair to that athlete. Organization. I'm not gonna, there are days that I come in and my judging bag is an absolute mess, right? But for the most part, I know where exactly everything is. Every time we get a new book, you've all seen my book. It's laminated, there's tabs, highlighted. I know where all the new rules are. I know what rules are new. I usually have them tabbed, and I know exactly where I need to be to find the answer if I'm not entirely sure where I'm going to find the exact rule for the evaluation, for the judgment that I'm making. Or if you don't look organized, you don't look professional. And I think that really poorly reflects on your ability to properly evaluate an athlete. Okay, accountability. I think sometimes this one gets lost. I think we need to absolutely remember that as professionals, we are accountable for our actions. And I'm not just talking about our actions on the floor while officiating. I'm talking about our actions on social media. I'm talking about our interactions with parents, our interactions with athletes, our interactions with coaches and athletic directors, and even the custodial staff who've been waiting all night for our meet to get over so they can sweep up the track and be ready for school the next day. I think we have to be accountable for all of those things. And if we do something wrong, we are also responsible for apologizing for it, trying to fix it, doing better the next time. And I think that gets lost on us, and us being the generic us as officials. Not more often than not, but every so often I feel that we kind of get sucked down that rabbit hole, and it really reflects poorly on all officials too, not just gymnastics officials. So I guess I'd take the opportunity to really see what you guys feel about that too.
Well, I'll chime in.
Oh, go ahead, Brett.
I'm sorry. I think accountability and new technology really comes down to social media becoming a culprit. And I know we like to have open discussion here and there, but these are the venues where we should have these kind of discussions, not on Facebook. Too many eyes out there that will misunderstand where you're going or misinterpret a rule. And that accountability for us, I like the fact that you stay off of social media, you don't discuss, I'm a firm believer you don't like a specific team, you don't comment on their sports pages. You just let it go, knowing that we have a different job to do, and our job is to stay completely 100% neutral. We don't have an opinion. If we need to discuss a rule, then we need to set it up either in our association, or we need to have a Zoom meeting where we're brought together on all sides of the state to discuss something. So for me, social media is one of the biggest problems with accountability.
Absolutely, Brenda. I mean, we can hide behind it, right? We're pseudo-anonymous. Even though our name is attached to it, nobody's looking at us in the face. 9 times out of 10, the things that are said on social media is not something that you would say directly to a person standing in front of you, you know, within arm's reach. And I think that's a really big deal. Okay, the last one I have, and we're actually going to talk about ethics in a little bit, is ethics. I think a professional official has to be ethical. We're going to talk about later in 2 slides, actually, what it means to be ethical and the code of ethics that already appears in our officials handbook that I'm not sure all of us remember is actually there. So those are my 8 characteristics of a professional. And now we're going to take the opportunity for an activity. There's so much room for activities. Okay, so here's our activity for right now. If you would, any one of you, feel free, provide me with an example of an official who you feel, and this is a hypothetical official, by the way, that you feel does not meet the definition of a professional. What would that person look like to you?
I think showing up to a meet at 5 minutes before start time, with no rules book and dressed inappropriately. Is that what you're looking for?
Yep. Is that it?
Oh, I could go on and on and on.
Okay.
But I was gonna let somebody else.
Sure.
You know what? I got one.
Okay.
Years ago, and I'm going to be honest, it was my very, very first meet. The state itself was hurting for judging officials. There just wasn't many of us. And I had gone through a 6-week training, and the official sitting next to me was someone who was encouraged to send their additional $5 in and pick another sport. And they picked our sport and was so ill prepared. Actually was sitting as the head bar judge, but was so unprepared that she couldn't tell me the difference on my first day between a back roll and a back pullover. So I ended up being the head bar judge on my very first meet. So being prepared in the chair or being lack of prep is extremely unethical, or you know where I'm going with that.
Unprofessional. Yeah.
Yes, that's my example.
That's a good one. Brittany, do you got anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say like comments, like maybe that are outside of like conferencing, like for example, like, oh gosh, or like, like facial expressions, things like that. It's just really unnecessary, and that's not the point of, while we're there. It's like, kind of like word vomit, and it's like, yeah, it needs to stay in.
Mm-hmm. So on the flip side, what is your example of a true professional gymnastics official?
Somebody that is knowledgeable, somebody that is unbiased, somebody who is prepared and is competent in all events and the rules.
Okay. Brenda, Doris?
Yep, I'm in. Someone who walks through the gym doors 30 minutes prior to start time, who doesn't mingle with coaches and athletes, who sits down at their station, prepares, opens their books, maybe reads through things a little bit, sits quietly, stands for the national anthem, does their job, signs off, and walks out of the gym. It's not our job to correct coaches or to correct athletes after the fact. It's do your job, do it well, and go home.
Doris, do you have anything you want to add?
And dress appropriately, because it was my first one of being unprofessional. So just dressing appropriately, acting. I mean, you can dress professional and still not act professional. So that kind of the two have to go hand in hand.
True. Okay, so now that we have those 2 examples, we have an unprofessional example and we have an example of somebody who exudes professionalism. what would you assume would be the difference in the level of success for between those two different officials? How would you describe that?
I would see the professional official going, up to the state level, and the unprofessional, just having a couple doubles and maybe not being asked back.
Right. So if you demonstrate professionalism, then you are likely to be more successful, right?
Mhm.
I think that is true with our day jobs, because I don't think any of us are officiating, full time. And it's also very true as an official. So the point here was trying to demonstrate that what professionalism can do for you personally. Not, it's all about the athlete, but what does it mean to ourselves individually to be professional? I would also add that the individual who acts professional is already and will be potentially garnered more respect. Maybe they'll be treated differently, among the athletes. Maybe they'll be, instead of walking into the gym and having the athletes roll their eyes because you're walking into the gym, or sigh heavily, or this may have never happened to anybody who is on this call because we're all extremely professional. But, maybe it changes the outcome of the athletes as well. Maybe it changes the outlook of the coaches and what they, instead of having them talk poorly about us behind our backs. I'm not saying any schools or any coaches that we see regularly would do that, but maybe, right? So
Well,
go ahead.
We officiate a very subjective sport. And if you don't look like and do your job well, look like you know what you're doing, do it well, come prepared, how do you justify pushing scores out for these athletes when you don't look like you're there to do the job? And the audience, the coaches, the athletes, all of them are going to look at you and say, whew, don't send her back, or where did they get that official? When it's all encompassing. You have to be prepared, you have to walk the walk, you have to know your job, and you have to have some integrity in this sport. I mean, we are doing it. I know those of us that are on this call, we're doing it because we love the sport. We love the sport. I mean, we've been glued to the TV this week. Let's all be honest. So you have to have enough integrity to walk in knowing that you're carrying your side of the table to the best of your ability. You owe it to the athletes, you owe it to yourself.
Couldn't have said that better. Thank you. Okay. So let's move on. I don't know. I mean, all of you, I think you know this, but I will be honest with you. I had to remind myself when I was asked to do this presentation about it, and I actually had to pull it up and review the officials' code of ethics from the National Federation of High School Associations. And so they're pretty straightforward. Obviously, we are required to register, join, and this is the key for me, actively participate with an approved association. That's where our continuing education goes. Accept contracts and contests that you qualify for, meaning you are registered with the MHSA to officiate both at the junior high and high school levels. Be prepared. We've talked extensively about this, not just physically, but mentally officiate. Cultivate professionalism. This is why we just spent 30 minutes talking about what professionalism is, because we're required to do so. Commit to a lifestyle that meets the standards and obligations. So again, we must be professional. Brittany, did you want to chime in right there?
No, did I?
Okay.
Okay.
Nope, you're fine. Officiate according to the rules. Exercise self-control, and then hold and maintain the basic tenets of officiating. And I think when we think about those basic tenets of officiating, for a lot of us, they are just our natural way of life, right? So what are the basic tenets of officiating? Can any of the three of you remember any of them? There's 8, by the way. I'm not gonna lie, I had to look them up too. Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
I would need to do that.
Yep. So quick review. Let's talk about the 8 tenets of basic officiating: honesty, integrity, neutrality, respect, sensitivity, professionalism, discretion, and tactfulness. So, obviously we spent so much time talking about professionalism today because that is a basic tenet of officiating. I think we all can be, I think overall we are all always we're all pretty honest. We are all very respectful, always. I think there are questions sometimes about neutrality, a lot of times from the parents, right? And the coaches. We're definitely extremely sensitive. We are not always tactful. Some examples I have in my head are just, we've been accused of having, maybe some issues with our discretion. But I think we can continue to build on our level of professionalism, which is why we're talking about this today. Does anybody agree or disagree with any of those statements?
I agree with all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. I think that all of us at any given time could show a little more improvement here or there. Most of the colleagues that I've judged with, I've really seen professional people. I mean, occasionally we have that slip here and there, sometimes at no fault of our own, sometimes areas that we could step up. And, when we are in the senior position, not that we're better officials, but just in the senior position, I probably in the last 5 or 6 years have not felt uncomfortable saying to a younger official, hey, maybe we need to watch out this way. Be careful not to go on social media. You might mean well, but it could bite you in the end. So, or, we all look good today because we're all wearing our black jackets. So I'm glad we had this training. So there's room for all of us to kind of step in a tactful manner to improve our overall position as officials.
I absolutely agree, Brenda. And I found this cartoon because I really feel like sometimes we have one of these moments, and oftentimes it might come across as unprofessional, maybe. It might not always necessarily be tactful. I know it's you start chuckling at something that you did, or maybe the athlete is even chuckling at something she did. And it's just, there's a very fine line. And I don't know how many, I've lost count of how many of these moments where I just have to be like, what was that? I missed it. I didn't see it. I blinked. There's a blank on my score sheet, or I just totally miffed.
Or the athlete
Or
did something, she got lost in the air, and we have to try to interpret what that was.
right.
Right. And we all see those weird things differently in the moment.
Correct. So I think there is, when we're talking about those basic tenets of officiating, when we're talking about, tactfulness and discretion, sometimes there's a really fine line. And we still need to do our best to maintain that. But at the same time, it's also completely okay to have fun too. And sometimes it's these moments where it is just fun.
I have to tell you, I'm going to confess, Doris and I probably, I bet you 30 years ago, we were judging a small high school dual meet, and the athlete was dancing at us, pointing straight at us and coming forward. And then she did this beautiful, I bet you it was a 180-degree side kick, but her bottom leg went right out from underneath her, about 5 feet away from us. And your gut reaction is to suck air and then laugh. And inappropriately, we struggled to get it together after that. And so did the athlete. But you just didn't expect her to just go to the mat. And there was a wrestling mat back then, so it was the loudest boom in the gym ever. But yeah, we were that what just happened kind of chicken at that point.
Yeah, those are moments that are, I think you can really, they make you relatable also to the athlete. True. Brittany just added in the chat that masks have helped everybody, mask their facial expressions while they're officiating. That is true. That is helpful. Although I have been told that I laugh in my eyes too. I tend to raise my eyebrows, which isn't helpful. But yeah, I mean, you can't avoid those. And it really, I think it does humanize an official too, which is also helpful. We just have to make sure that we don't cross that, unprofessional line. Okay, let's move on here. Okay, so now we're going to kind of transition. We've talked about being professional. Now we're going to talk about how do we prep for a meeting. These are basically solely based off of how I prep for a meet. I said meeting, I'm sorry. Pretty much the same thing, but how do we prep for a gymnastics meet? Okay. Rule number 1, right? Have all of your materials ready. Out of curiosity, in the aviation world, we use checklists and everything is done by a checklist. I've contemplated maybe some type of checklist for officiating, because I have been caught without something, whether it's, it's a weeknight meet, right? And you're out doing something, kids got to be, taken somewhere, dropped off to some other practice. And then all of a sudden you realize you're without something. So how do you compartmentalize and make sure that you have everything when you have it, or you're running all over town? I have been stuck. It's not fun. Okay. Review the rules. Rule number 2, sometimes it might be if you have 5 minutes on your lunch hour, if you have, maybe it's for 15 minutes before you leave, or maybe, it's, oh, wait, we had this interesting situation at the last meet that I was at. I want to go back and review those rules so that I am prepared. It's either the same school, or, maybe if it's in a new school and you've gotten a phone call about it, about to ensure that you officiated that incident issue athlete correctly the last time. Be on time and dressed appropriately. Okay. I can tell you that 9 times out of 10 for a weekday meet, it does not matter if I have time to go home in between. I always dress in meet appropriate wear for that day, just in case. Because if for some reason something happens and I can't go home to change, then I'm potentially late, and any other number of things could happen on the way. And for me, I would much rather have that box checked on my checklist early than have to worry about it late. So that usually is one of the things that I do first to ensure that I am prepared.
My coworkers know I'm wearing black because, oh, you're judging again.
Exactly right. And in fact, my coworkers say that every single time. Oh, you must have a meet tonight. Yep.
There are days you wear 4 days straight, not the same, but black and white for 4 days. And oh, you're judging. Yep. Exactly.
Yep.
Sometimes I'll throw a scarf on during the day just to shake it up a little bit.
And Brittany, you are absolutely right. I always keep an extra pair of shoes in my car in the winter, period. But typically they are black between January and March, specifically for judging. Absolutely. Look and act alert. So it's not that I, maybe grab a cup of coffee or a Diet Coke before I go. It's more that I stop my brain from what it was doing and move my brain into officiating so that I am alert and ready for my next responsibility as an official. And I'm not carrying through something that went on before, whether it be something at home or something at the office. So looking and acting alert is something that I have on my checklist. It's just a, hey, time out, stop what you're doing. Let's move on. Let's move on to gymnastics today so that you can be a professional official. Okay. Be consistent and administer the rules the same at each meet. I think, and I don't think it happens as much anymore, but I put this on there because there always used to be, and I think there can be still, that propensity to judge harder at bigger meets or judge harder at regionals or finals. This, right, Brittany. But if you, in my mind, the best compliment that I can get from any coach is, I really like it. If, when my parents come in and they say, man, those scores were really low, it's just the beginning of the season. And then the coach can say, yep, but I came right back and told them that if they get a higher score from you, that means that they are improving. And they are working on, they're working to either fix what needs to be fixed, or they're improving in their skills and they're adding difficulty, things of that nature. So to me, I take it as a really big compliment to know that a coach knows to expect that the score they get from me today for that routine is going to be the exact same score they're going to get from me if they perform the exact same routine at finals.
Well, and Angie, to add to that, it's not fair to the athlete to swing the rule book lighter at the beginning of the season and give them, all sorts of leeway, and then get close to the end of the season when you should be looking good, and you as the official have let them slide on areas that should have been cleaned up anyway. And then they get to the big meets and they're lost as to why, they're scoring low, if that's the case. I know Doris and I, or I can speak for myself, but it's been 40 years of, we don't change.
Yep.
From the beginning of the season to the end. If you scored a 7.5 and you did a routine that was questionable, you're going to get that 7.5 in December, and you're going to get that 7.5 in February. But if you scored a 9.5 in December, and it's the same routine, you're going to get that 9.5. There shouldn't be a lot of surprises for the athletes. However, we all know that it's subjective. So, you get what you get, and you learn to build on your averages. If I was coaching, that's what I would tell my kids. Take the average, not your high, not your lows, but your average throughout the season.
The other part, Brenda, that that really kind of breaks my heart a little bit for the athletes are those that come in and they say something to, I will venture any of us on this call right now that would say, I'm glad you gave us that score because I know that's what I'm going to see at finals, and the rest of my season has been inflated or extremely low. That to me is heartbreaking that the athletes can figure that out.
Or a coach will say, I don't understand why we're getting this deduction today.
Right.
Well, you didn't fulfill event requirement, or you missed X, Y, and Z.
Right.
We owe that. We owe the consistency across the board as officials, first and foremost. And secondly, that is testament to why you mix up your officials.
Yep.
So that you have a good point of view from different sides of the state, different areas, and different opinions on how some techniques should look a little bit,
And I think, Brenna, not just, and when you say mixing up officials, I think that means mixing up the entire panel, not just changing out one official here and one official there. I think it needs to be, you need completely fresh eyes, throughout the season on your athletes so that you can see that progression. And as an aside, and this is said completely out of love and affection to both you and Doris, you have been consistent for well over 24 years as a competitor and as an official. It's refreshing to be able to see that consistency on both sides of the table.
Well,
I hope you took that as a compliment. Okay.
Well, we used to hear that when you were competing, it's like, Oh, we've got Doris and Brenda. Yep, they're tough, but they're
Yep.
consistent.
Exactly right. Exactly right. I'm not gonna lie. I would roll my eyes, but I knew what to expect, and it was never a surprise, right? And it's one of those like people that you, both of you, are, you know, people that you learn to respect throughout, and after, you know, after you're done living it, then you can, you know, really appreciate it and figure out why it was the way it was. And I think that's important for us to learn and grow from. Okay. Be fair and unbiased. I think this is one's pretty obvious, right? So prepare yourself to be fair and unbiased. Don't walk into a building or you know, set yourself up to be walking into a building with the idea, oh, this coach is so hard to work with. Oh, this coach really makes my life miserable. Well, guess what, everybody? The coach has a job to do, and that coach's job is to advocate on behalf of their athlete. And I want to take a second right here to talk about inquiries, because I think that there are officials who take offense to being inquired on. The coach has a job to do, and that is to advocate on behalf of their official and the way that they are interpreting the rules. We have a job to do to interpret and enforce the rules based on the rule book as well. And sometimes there's going to be a disagreement or confusion, however you want to label it, about the appropriate way to enforce that rule. And a coach is allowed to ask you about it through the inquiry process and system. And if you go into the meet not believing that a coach has the right to do their job that way, then you're not the all-powerful Oz, right? You are a human being, and essentially it is very possible for you to make a mistake. I've made plenty. I've been inquired upon, and I've corrected my mistake. And that's the way the system is supposed to work. So
Built-in checks and balance.
it's a built-in check and balance. Absolutely correct. And when I've tossed this in there in my steps for preparation, because it is a mindset for me to walk into a meet or to prepare myself for a meet, being fair and unbiased before I even get there. I think that's extremely important for us.
Well, one of the pieces, sorry, I'm going to stay with the topic, but go down a different rabbit hole, is that you may have seen this team 3 other times, but today is a new day. Yep. And anything can happen. So you have to be prepared to sit in that chair and assume this athlete is a completely new athlete every day, every time you see them. It's not fair to say, well, last week she bombed it, so, you know, be prepared. She's probably not going to be able to do it again today. That's not the case at all. You have to walk in fresh eyes every day.
Absolutely.
You know, one
Absolutely.
thing that we don't get to do, you know, and is at the duels, you know, we typically don't talk to the coaches, and yes, they should know that they can inquire, but we get very few inquiries during the duels. We'll get them more during the invitationals, regionals, and state finals. And when we have our coaches meeting, we encourage them to inquire, correct? You know, say if we're not perfect, we're going to miss things. This is, you know, sometimes on floor, they're spinning fast, you know. So it'd be nice to try to figure out a way, you know, again, because we don't have coaches meeting, and we shouldn't have them at duels, but to make sure they should know that it's okay to inquire at duels. It's okay. Don't just say, oh, you missed that at the end of the meet. Well, how come you didn't inquire? Because I don't ever inquire. Well, shame on you. You need to inquire. That's your job as a coach.
Agreed.
And it's our job to not be offended when it comes our way.
Correct. I'm never offended. It's like I feel bad, you know, that I missed it.
Yep.
And I should have, but we're human. We're gonna miss it, and I'll correct it if I did. You know.
Well, and as a meet ref at some of these bigger invitationals, and you're doing your job to maintain your officials' consistency, and you have a coach that has a confused look on their face, it's okay to step up and say, I see that you are not sure of something. Can I help you? Or can I answer some questions for you based on the score sheet that just came through? You know, because some of them don't want to rattle the cage when they really need to, but it's not our place to open up a can of worms either. Just be there and available and approachable, because like Doris said, there are some that say, no, I won't do that. you shouldn't feel that way as a coach, but we also have to be responsible and not be offended when they come through. Checks and balance.
Absolutely. Brittany's coming in on the chat. I just want to make sure I don't miss anything. She says absolutely, and we need to make sure that we share that statement and sentiment with the coaches. I agree, Brittany. I do try to encourage that in a coaches meeting when I do coaches meetings, and I think, Brenda, that's a really good idea. You know, as a meet ref, to encourage, you know, to ask probing questions maybe of a coach that might have that confused look on their face. Here's here's that next part. Allow the coaches to do their jobs to the best of their ability, and that includes their ability to inquire. I think we need to allow them to do that. Careful about socializing. So, you know, so I'm kind of going through my steps here, and now I'm already at the gym, right? So be careful about socializing with the athletes, with the coaches. Ensure you're garnering an appearance of fairness and unbiased. Oh, that was the last one. Did anybody have any questions on that before I move on to the next?
Nope, I think it's
okay.
good.
So here are some things, the basics, right? So these are the more meat and potato, other checklist items. These are the basic ones that I think in the aviation world, these are the things that we do so regularly that oftentimes they're left out. Okay. Review your contract, know where you're going and what your start time is. Arrive 30 minutes prior. Prepare your judging uniform and attire. We covered this one in my last one too. Here are some things, you know, like identify yourself to the staff. How many times have you gotten to a meet and there's a different parent volunteer or a different faculty member sitting at the table doing, checking people in and doing, you know, taking money for the spectators and things like that. Oh, I have to wrap up in the next 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, Brent, I'll go through quick. Okay. Work with your colleagues to select your events when you get there. Educate your timekeepers and score flashers. Okay. Things that we take for granted. Things that probably should happen more frequently. Measuring, especially those facilities that are set up year round. Do I do this at every meet? Right? Identify a meet referee who's the most senior official there in the event that we do need a meet referee, even at a dual meet. Identify your chief judges. I think everybody's pretty good about that. Identify your timers and your procedures. I know I've sat down at a meet and, you know, had an athlete sit down, non-competing athlete sit down next to me and made the assumption that they know what they're doing and when to do it. Hasn't always worked out the best. Inquiries, I think we've touched on that pretty good, that, you know, a lot of times, Brenda, like you said, the coaches don't necessarily want to inquire because they don't want to upset the apple cart, but yet they should and they need to. I put this one in again intentionally because I do think that some of us do get offended with an inquiry and I don't want us to. Okay. Here's today's joke of the day. We're almost done. You ready? Why doesn't Where's Waldo do gymnastics? Anybody?
I don't know.
You guys are going to roll your eyes because nobody can spot him.
Ah, yuck, yuck.
Oh, come on. Okay. Joke time. All right. That was it. I got through it much faster than 5 minutes than Brent needed me to. Does anybody have any questions or comments to follow up?
Nice job. And there's another one tomorrow at 4, so y'all need to be on board.
Another one at 4 tomorrow. Was that communicated via email?
Not
It
yet.
will be soon.
I actually just sent it out to all the gymnastics officials, so it should be out to you and posted on Facebook. I apologize. I had, as I mentioned, a couple of meetings going on at the same time. I thought I could run a third, but I was bumped. So I did not mean to interrupt. You guys are having such a good conversation and discussion, and it was very informative for me listening in. So I'm sure that gymnastics officials will be informed as well. So.
You did a good job, Angie. A lot of good points were discussed, and I agree with Brett. We had some good conversations that, as others listen to it, hopefully they'll learn from it and be better professional officials.
I agree. I really appreciate the conversation. You guys always bring good food for thought. So Brent, thank you for the opportunity to do this presentation for the gymnastics officials and for Officiate Michigan Day. And please, for those of you on the call, don't forget officials registration is open. So be sure to renew your registrations.
And always sign up one more. Excellent. Thank you again, Angie. I appreciate your help. Thank you all for being on here. We'll release this on July 31st. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.